There we go. All right. I am so excited to welcome all of you tonight. These are first books for both Arden and Carole, and it's such a thrill to be introducing two extremely talented writers and their unique voices to the world. As Arden and Carole read, we'd like you to put any questions that you might have into the chat. We're going to have a short discussion at the end of the reading, and they would love to answer any questions that you might have. Arden is a storyteller. She is a biographer of women that we know, women we've only met in history books, women we might sit next to at Thanksgiving dinner. I was drawn to Ladies Abecedary because I felt connected to every poem personally. But now I can never attempt an abecedarian because this book has mastered the form. Arden's ladies are nameless, yet every page presents a detailed portrait. We are satisfied and also want more. Her ladies are the paintbrush and the palette, the paints and the skin of unblended and unblemished blue and blue that she pours into our upturned palms. Please welcome Arden Levine.
Wow. Thank you so much, Allison, for that introduction. That was beautiful. And thank you to just everyone at Harbor Editions for taking this collection of poems and putting it on numbered and bound pages. It was hard and heartfelt work, and I'm so grateful for it. So before I read, a couple of things. First, quick vocab lesson for folks who are new to this term. What is an abecedary? It's an alphabet book. And more specifically, it's a book that teaches us the alphabet. So often abecedaries will associate letters of the alphabet with a group of things. So Ogden Nash did it with animals. Cicely Mary Barker did it with flowers in England. Edward Gorey did it with doomed children. In this book, my book, every letter is a woman, every woman is a poem, and every poem is a story. So together, I hope they raise a remark about how a female story is told and by whom it's told, and how the possession of language by women can create visibility for their stories. Someone said of my book that they are figuring out how words help build identity, and I was really moved by that. So that's a bit of what I was going for, and now I want to do some show and tell. So due to postal snafus, I'm reading from an advanced proof copy this evening, but if you just ignore the not for resale banner, you can still appreciate this stunning cover art by Rosemary Fate Covey and the design by Rico Frederick. And it is doubly spectacular when you open it up and see the full face. So just want to make sure everybody gets a good gander at that. I'm also going to show you the book so that you can see sort of each poem and how it is a letter, and you'll get a sense of how that works when I read them. So speaking of reading, let's meet our poem letter ladies. I've picked just a few to introduce you to tonight. B, little she, was told she could be whoever she wished in the school pageant. So she chose God, and God would wear a smudge of blue upon her face. And God would wear a gown of paper and language upon her body. And God would wear a crown of buoyant clouds upon her noggin, and in her throat, God would carry lightning, press it white and hard into attentive air, like teeth newly cut through tender gums. In the audience, attendants remark on God. So many times God pissed on me. Often God has thrown her hands wild like warring starlings. Twice, God briefly disappeared, leaving me blind. Once, God vomited, exaltedly, into my cupped supplicant hands. Amen. F opens a beer on the first Sunday after Thanksgiving and tells everyone about this year's pies. about how most of the customers wanted cherry and not the usual pumpkin or apple, and how orders flew in like insects through open windows. Then she says that late Wednesday night, she dropped a tray of 8, watched them shatter their faces against the kitchen tiles, spill their ruby innards. What did you do then? Everyone asks. Roll dough. She places that reply so casually down, as if she described knocking over a cup of water in her sleep and waking to find the floor already near dry. This, and not a story of toil in making, toil in cleaning, toil in remaking, mourning loss. Anyway, she claims to have liked the second batch better. Smooth, clean edges, full. Jay says, speaking of the hard-won conclusions, it's good to know, no matter how you have been treated or mistreated, what it is you deserve. Her kind of Black, high balance credit cards and high heel balancing acts, cigarillos, that voice, like sliding the mourner's armband up the sleeve. When she goes to the other place, her voice is the cemetery drive in Cadillac hearses. She says, the other place, and sometimes the good place. Ah, yes. I've got 2 more. Elle claims to him that she's not the type to drape herself in serpents and offer curious apples, but isn't that just the lie such a woman would tell? Someone wants a bite. She mentions that in the photo at the farm, her arms embrace a goat with a fetish for her hair, so she tied it up, but it kept trying. No way to sate a satyr. Sounds like a horny goat. He feels a tiny cartoon beast lean on his neck, tap a pitchfork against his clavicle. Before long, that tail will slip halfway down his throat. Come here, come. The last one is actually one of the ones that Allison quoted, so that makes me happy, and it has the possibly most uplifting, literally, ending, so it's a good one to end on. N receives gifts from them, broken, just for her. Here is a bright patch of red on a blue quilt. Here are thick, smooth splinters and glittering shale chipped from the leveled mountain. Here, they brought her the last zinnia and some water to hold it for a day or 2. After that, she will hang it by its heels, so blood rushes to its head. The water is no good for drinking or washing or making tea. Here is a whistle that sounds at an inaudible frequency and a piano with its strings cut. They bring her here, low, and yet here, her raised, accepting arms, her empty, upturned palms. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's always fun to hear authors read their own work, because for me, it sounds a certain way, and then you get to hear how it's supposed to sound, how it sounds to the author. So Carole is reading next, and I have a surprise guest for Carole, who is going to introduce her. One of the editors at Harbor Editions worked pretty closely with Carole, and he snuck on to help introduce her book. Cameron? Oh, I think you're still muted. Give us a second to unmute you.
I'll unmute myself now. Are we good?
Yes, you're good.
Well, awesome. Yeah, I'm glad I was able to make it. I have my son sort of poking in here in the corner of the screen. He's brushing his teeth and getting ready for bed. And I'm sitting on a stool in the bathroom, soaking my foot after having a couple of warts removed. So I have holes in my feet now. That being said, he's going to bed, and I'm so yeah, okay, close the door. Anyway, I'm so glad to be here. Carole's book just floored me. It was so good. From the first page on, just the tone, her tone of sort of sardonic humor intermingled with real human warmth is something that I'm always looking for and listening for, and very seldom find. So it was just such a great warm surprise. And I use the word warmth because a lot of the book is very Arctic and very cold in its setting, and her musings that range from human relationships to a backdrop of sort of scientific exploration, really effective poems, accomplishing in a fragmentary lyric, minimalist lyric mode, something truly warm and human. And I was privileged to work with her. I saw the cover as it came along and finally reached its final beautiful incarnation. And I'm going to turn it over because I can't wait for you guys to hear what's to come. It's good.
Oh my gosh, Cameron, thank you. And Allison. So I did get mine. And so I have Katie Tandy, who did the cover design, and Billy Rankle, who did the cover art. And I'm just thrilled about it for a number of reasons. I'm going to actually read the epitaph. And this is from Sappho. Heart, absolutely I can, would be for me to shine in answer, face having been stained. And that's from fragment 4. Oh, Anne Carson's translation. Glint, number 1. Wouldn't it be just like our baby to come on a Sunday in August traffic, you mimicking Nurse Ratched, and me relieved it wasn't my sister's cooking that spoiled the evening. Swooning under yellow hospital light for one more lick of ice, and you to sorrow, oddly content with cold hospital ziti. 2. So much of the world inside, sipped through the nipple, ready to read saliva, ready to read a mother's antibodies. I tell our baby, don't let anyone suck the language of water out of you, or erase the backwash inside. The world's waters, your mother's sacred, huge, outrageous rivers wrap you. Fast forward to 6. These are bodies like primordial jellyfish, dreaming with volume up. 7. How after rain smells, when flesh feels most savage, you glean, my sweat, my steam, claim I'm too intense to awake, to make a home out of a rising body count. Far outside my skin, tepid, you run from my emotional velocity, a graining of sense, I swear. 8. Your body now smoke, heat gone in a glance of Arctic air. 9. Take 91 straight up through Deerfield, and as we pass Putney, you imagine the lift under your skis. I have a moment too, seeing light return to your face, the smell of fresh pine. Try to picture a horizon that bends. Nothing ever a straight line. "11. I do not want to be weaned by age or Stepford wives dreaming themselves erotic. There's only so much snow one can suppress. Bring me the last of the rosé, all you luminous souls, and I will speak of marriage and of the 2, maybe 3 times I felt most deliciously female." Number 13. When the light is low, when darkness feels like a fresh start, for restraint to thin out loud, a couple of vowels, odd and personal, to say why not. There in that gaze, the glint you didn't get, you gave our girls what Darwin and Machen found holy moly in a tumble and a tickle, to heighten the play in gamma waves, the whiff of a baby, birth of oxytocin. Even an ape, daddy can learn to love is to survive. Number 16. On the night in February that shall remain unnumbered and nameless. Miso soup, suggests Nigel Slater, will do. The trick with a small scoop of yellow paste added to boiling water. You must throw in anything you care to discard, by which he means mushrooms, noodles, and Chinese greens. But tonight I toss in 2 once ecstatic hearts, now etherized, the tale of a smarmy bastard, a couple of straying souls, a long chain of kisses and roads taken then abandoned, luring you forward. Knowing there are times when you want something spicy and hot, and appetite gets the better of conscience, until a twist of the old knife and a poke with a fork. Number 17. Let lingering, let rage, let tongue, and yes, to touch, your skin pushed into. No, wait, grab a pencil with an eraser, more like every part of you marooned with mine. In another room, under the stairwell, back of a Buick Skylark. Let all this entrance and love too ruin us. Just a few more. 19. I in red gingham am my grandma's child, so proud, so loved. Still a kid, I kid you not. My first husband was a little rigid, let's just say like Hannah Gadsby, but seriously not as whip smart nor funny. The smell of fresh rosemary and orange peel, the push I need to harness the heat within. 21. Yes, you, that's right, you, Tesoro, my second, okay, technically my third love. You gave us much to worry, but you are gold, our golden boy. You played the part like only Pacino could. After summer passed on, the scent of hyacinth comes wafting back, as you do now. I think I'll close with 22. If you close your eyes to sorrow, imagine a thin green line follows a field, navy then white like cotton. Bird cries drown the quiet, it almost hurts to hear. How we moved on from so much flesh, beneath the cosmic gauze, pulsing, pulsing purple, minutes before a pink dawn, like skin turned way down from summer's heat. Hydrangea nettle, beach plums. Let it be enough.
Thank you, Carole. So now we're going to do a little question discussion. It's our first attempt at this, so hopefully everyone enjoys it. And I don't think that we have questions yet, so I'm going to ask a few questions to kind of get us started. And Carole, I'm so glad that you read that poem with the line "deliciously female," because I think that what connects both of your collections is that sort of interiority or the exploration of that which is feminine or female. And so I'm thrilled that you read that poem with that line in it. So the first question is, what inspired each of you to write this reflection on female experience?
So that's a great question. I'll tell a little story. I grew up with poetry, but I was also growing up with a lot of like rock music in the 90s and in the aughts. And when I heard Tori Amos's album Strange Little Girls, I felt there was something to it. And for those who aren't familiar with it, it's an album where she has taken songs that were written by men about women and she sort of musically reclaims them. And I thought that's a really cool idea. And it gave me this idea about what it means to tell a woman's story and how that comes together either in language or in tone, and how it's been achieved in throughout centuries and throughout cultures. And I was moved by it enough that when it finally came back around, when I was much older, I said, is there some way to achieve that with poetry? And so that's sort of one of the things that made me think about writing this particular book. And I'm grateful for how that different sort of genre led into it.
Well, Allison, that poem, that particular poem with that line, was the first poem I wrote for this collection. I think it was one of maybe two nucleuses that inspired that poem. And it's funny, Cam also mentioned the Arctic airline in the introduction, because these poems were kind of birthed in between the polar vortex of 2019, which we were suffering from in the Midwest, and then literally the start of COVID-19. So right in between then, just trying to find something to kind of shore me up personally. And I ended up, I wouldn't say it was so much what inspired me to write the collection, so much as who inspired me. And I literally brought my tutelary spirits with me, because these were the poets who I felt like I wanted to both draw from as well as enter into a conversation with. So Kamika Hahn, Holly Wren Spalding, Lucille Clifton, Louise Gluck, and always Sappho for me, because she provides something both sexy as well as sacred, in those simple fragments. And I'm always looking for the line to pull me through. And I do think in terms of women's voices, it is a line from, let's say, from a girlfriend, from a sister, from a remembered, from my mother, some line besides my tutelary women poets, who bring me forth, at least for this collection.
Those answers absolutely make sense, having read both of your collections many times. So you read each other's books, and I'm wondering what sort of them stood out for you in each other's collections, and what reactions did you have upon reading each other's collections?
So not only have I gotten to read Carole's work at this point, but Carole and I have had some wonderful conversations about each other's work that have been wonderfully soul nourishing. And when you look at Carole's book, the first thing you notice is how the poems breathe. And by that, I mean there's space on the page that acts as a space that the reader can enter into. And I love the way she achieves that. It's starting right from the epigraph with it, as if you see it, it's just these fragments of a Sappho poem. And then she goes on to just sort of place these words in a way where certain sentences could be finished if you wanted them to be, or they could continue on if you had something you could mentally insert into that space. And to be able to achieve that, I think, is so powerful. And I'm sort of, I saved a couple of my poems so I could read them responsively to these questions if it came up. But there's one poem I have that really uses a lot of space in Ladies of a Cedary, and it's R. R had a dream. The baby was coming much too soon. On hands and knees, thinking nothing would survive this. She also thought, if this were the last moment, could she part from her life and leave behind her books? Her waking self thinks, strange, to be less concerned with dying and never meeting her child. She pulls a book off the shelf, reads aloud the words water, fear, and almost when they appear. Words agitating for attention, wailing and terrified. God help me.
Arden, I'm so glad you read that one. That one, I just felt a particular affiliation. Although I have to say, I just felt with yours, there was reading yours from A to Z. I felt this visceral reaction, and I felt like I was in immediate good company. Like, it was amazing how varied these women's stories were. Oh, and so elegant. The sonics in your poems are, I just want to read them out loud. And I'm so glad you picked out some of my favorites. The other one that always gets to me is F. And I still, it's the pie. I have to say it's the pie, that full pie. But there's something, it's gorgeous, it's soulful. And then the intrigue. And the first when I met Arden, I think it was after I read her poems, and I was like, tell me who Jay is. Is Jay? And then I said, no, don't tell me. I don't want to know. Because these poems had already kind of entered my body, and I didn't want to, I want to know, and I don't want to know.
And it's so funny you bring that up, Carole, because I have to say two things. One that's specific to Carole, and one that's not. So every time I read these poems, and I've been reading them for 2 years now, inevitably someone will come up to me or write me an email and be like, so N was so and so, right? Or so F is definitely blah blah blah. And I'll be like, well, is that who you think it is? Because while some of them I think are clearly inspired by certain people, the idea is that there's a universality of these stories. And but the story about Carole is that the first thing she said was, well, Jay is about, and she named somebody. I was like, and she kind of stopped me short, because it's not about that person any more than it's about any other person. But now every time I think of that poem, I think of that person, because it's so right on. And so I learn more about these poems from the readers than I knew when I was writing them. So that's a really powerful experience that Carole's given me as I've been rereading my own work.
So many possibilities.
I think it's fascinating, Arden, that you read that poem. That also, I mean, the images are so familiar between both of your works. I think, for a second I was like, oh wait, that's in Carole's book, because your book starts that way. And so I think that's fascinating, that you two have like echoing images sometimes in the poems. And I think Carole's point that that Arden's book wants to be read out loud is funny, because I had written an introduction, Carole, before I was able to talk Cameron into introducing you, and it literally says, your poems beg to be read out loud. And so that you would say that about each other's, I think it's fascinating that you two got paired up together, and that there's so much in common between your work. So
spacing too, right? The way they're spaced on the page too, there's a similarity, I think.
Yeah, I agree. So what do you hope that readers will learn or take away from your work, as it relates to femininity or female experience? And what are you kind of taking from each other's works?
That's a great question. So I would say that actually what I hope people take away from my work is kind of similar to what I'm taking away from Carole's work, which is great. So in my daily life, I work in public policy, and in social service, and social justice. And I spend a lot of time thinking about how we can hold space for two things that look on their face like they seem in conflict, but they are actually very complementary. This idea of the uniqueness of identity, and how we each need to respect the location of individual identities in order for a society to be as vibrant and compassionate as it can be. But then also to acknowledge that in some cases there's a universality of identity. There's things that we can see or hear in experiences that resonate no matter who we are as individuals. And so in my own work, I hope that people actually look at each of these ladies, see each of these sort of pieces of an alphabet, pieces of a set of stories, and see themselves in each person, but also see something particular in each of them. And in fact, that's sort of what I thought about when I was reading Carole's work, is that there's this wonderful sense of Carole in her work. She obviously experienced a great deal of what she writes about, because she writes about it with the kind of sensitivity that requires sort of a personal introspection. But there's also so much universality of female experience in those poems, where anybody can sort of read themselves into it. And then again, she kind of gives people the space very explicitly to do that in a lot of cases. So all to say, I hope my book strikes the same balance that I have felt in reading hers.
We didn't even prepare these answers, but I just love what you said. It's interesting. I so deeply respect the work you do, and of course your poetry, but the work you do too. And my day job as a psychologist, I listen to voices, and primarily 13 to 26-year-olds, sorting through stories, finding their voice. And what I hope from my readers, or for my readers, is that they feel welcomed, and maybe even amused or enticed to keep going, whatever it is. Relationships over time, what love looks like years in, can so vary minute by minute, and and speaking to the title, to be looking for that glint, or the flash of light, or the gleam, something in the larger landscape, or in their mirror, to be able to see what it is, that flicker, when they are feeling jazzed, when something really is meaningful. And, I'm forever encouraging others as well as myself to find those things to stoke the inner fire, whether you're into, and certainly I think I perfected the vegan brownie over COVID. So don't think I'm not baking too. But whether you're cooking a meal or you're splitting wood or you're feeding a feral cat, which I've got one of those, if that's what gives you vibrancy, my hope is that you'll find new ways to keep going.
Carole, there was a request in the comments. So somebody said, I wonder if Carole might read the poem beginning, "If this dress, this heart were a field of clover."
That's towards the end. Yes, that's number 23. If this dress, this heart were a field of clover soaked in sun, and you, a summer visitor, nose to bloom, I'd still have to call on purple in patience until we inhale and be healed.
That is the end of questions, unless Arden or Carole has anything else. All right, so thank you all for coming and for being here and supporting the press and our authors. And as always, head over to our website to purchase books and to check out some of the other books that we have available. Thank you so much.